Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to explore how we can use Wazoo's active response to isolate a server that may be compromised or that has triggered, maybe a very high severity alert like rootkit detected, and we want to isolate it completely from the network so that it's not able to, for example, if malware gets on the box, if we isolate this server, we can potentially stop that malware from spreading to other servers within our network. So stick around and we'll jump into it. But first, time for my shameless plug. If you want to learn more about our company, head on over to opensecure.co. If you would like to hire us for a project, select the Contact Us link in the description of this video. To see firsthand the power of open source, take advantage of our interactive demo. Select the demo link in the description of this video to start exploring. Now let's get back to the video. Alright, so let's say, for example, we have a server within our environment and it's running and everything is good, and all of a sudden Wazoo detects a rootkit has been installed on the server, or maybe a family of malware has been installed on the server and Wazoo has detected it. Rather than wait for someone on the security team to investigate the alert and take time to get the right personnel involved, maybe you're having to associate with the networking team to isolate the server or whatever the case may be, we can try to proactively isolate this server automatically without any human intervention, right? So let's say malware gets on the box, Wazoo detects it, a rule fires, that rule is associated with active response, and as part of that we have some scripts that run that will basically turn down the network interface of our isolated server so no traffic can come in, and I'm going to freehand this, so apologize. So traffic coming in is a no-go, and then traffic that's trying to leave the server, maybe to other servers within your environment, is also a no-go, right? So we isolate this server, and in order to get back onto it, say maybe it's a VM, you could get on the console, or if you have like a back channel, that interface that's on this box, you could access it that way as well. But what we want to do is stop anything else from getting onto this server, as well as stop the server from being a either a malware distributor, or maybe it turns out it acts as like a command and control server within our own network and we're just completely unaware of it. So let's see if we can make this work. I haven't actually implemented this before, so we're going to be learning and going through it together. I think I have an idea though, so let's jump into it. So what I'm thinking is, we have by default, Wazoo provides some binary scripts for us, right, by default, and one of those being a firewall drop.sh, right? So if we open this guy up, we can see how it interacts with creating a iptables rule to disallow inbound traffic from a particular IP address, right? So we see sets the variable IP here. It creates a iptables rule. So if I were to copy this exact command, right, and there's a lot of other if statements and some other sophistication, but more or less what's happening is, if I just copy this command and I'll type out the iptables, and I'll just do 8.8.8.8, 8.8.8. Oh geez, Taylor, figure it out. Okay, so if I do that, and now I list out my IP table, so I'm just copying the command that they call in the script, and they just have a variable of IP that replaces it with the IP address that generates the alert within active response. So if I do that, if I load my IP tables again, we now see it being dropped. So that handles the inbound portion of it, right? The guy on the left, this guy here. So that handles inbound. Now, what we need to do is see how we can configure the outbound portion of it. I've done some research on this. And so let's say, so I've done some research on this, and I think we can use a similar IP table statement to actually disallow any traffic from a specific NIC, right? So NIC being just a network interface card that's on my box. So if I do an if config here, I see my NIC is a ETH0, and this is the IP address that is assigned to it, right? So let's say our host is compromised, right? Active response rule triggers, and we already know how to handle the inbound section of it. And now to handle the outbound, we can just run another IP tables rule that disallows any outgoing traffic from our interface. So here they have ETH1, we'll just specify it with ETH0. So if I actually try and run this, let's see what happens. And I'll specify ETH0, and bam, that looks good. So I can no longer, of course, interact with my server. I'll have to get onto console here. So if I go into connect, open remote console, and this is just the cloud provider but I use, but if you're using like vSphere or vCenter or something like that, you'll have something similar. If I do iptables -vnl, let me output to less. We should see, okay, here we go. Where my cursor is hovering to the right here, we see the new IP tables rule that drops all traffic from ETH0, right? So that's pretty cool. Or, you know, we could even get more sophisticated and just do a specific destination. So we could disallow traffic to our subnet of internal networks, right? So we could add our internal networks as a destination in there as well. So we could get pretty sophisticated with it if we wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and run an iptables flush, and that will allow me to log back onto my server via PuTTY or whatever other SSH you're using. So I'll log back onto my server if I can get the password right. Okay, and now, okay, so I think we have a good idea of a command that we can run. Now we need to incorporate that within active response. And active response will call a script, right? So I'm thinking that within here we can copy our firewall drop script, and I'm going to name it, I'm gonna just say outbound. Outbound -drop -sh. So I'm gonna copy it there, and then I'm going to edit this guy, and I'm going to go down to our command that we call, and I'm gonna go ahead and change this to the syntax that I call to the command that we called a second ago. So I'm going to change, I'm going to run that, and instead of ETH1, I'll be ETH0. Let me actually get rid of the IP tables command because that's already being called. You can see up here we're specifying our IP tables variable, and we're pointing to the binary of IP tables. So we don't need to specify that. And I think that should work. So let's go ahead and give it a try. Let's see, what would be the best way to test this? So let's go ahead and see if we can run this. Let me look at permissions here. Okay, let me change the ownership to root OSEC so that Wazoo has the ability to run this. What did I call it? Outbound. Okay, so permissions look okay. If I try to run this, what happens? It's asking for action. So I could say add wazoo dash wui. It's asking for an IP, but we're not needing an IP. But of course the script that we copied does. So let's see if that still runs that. It should, because it's not, it's within the if statement there, and it looks like it did. Okay, so that's good. Let's get back on the console. And sure enough, it did run it. Okay, good. All right, let me flush these out again. Dash dash flush. And oh, did it give it back? Oh, it kept it. Nice. Okay, so now, okay, so that looks good. So now let's tell the manager to be able to call this script, since this is our own homegrown one, right? This isn't bundled with Wazoo. So let's go into configuration. Let's go into edit, and let's go ahead and we'll need to create our own command tag first. So I will just copy and paste this guy and call it, what do we call the script? Outbound drop. I'll just call it outbound drop. I'll call it outbound dash drop. The executable is our bash script, right? So outbound dash drop dash sh. It expects, they're asking it to expect, I mean, we don't need that though. So if we comment this out, I don't think we should be okay. I don't think that should give us an issue, because we're not assigning like a user variable or a IP variable, right? We're just hard coding in that the ETH0 interface is going to be turned down, right, with our command here. Okay, so that looks okay. So we specified our command. We're saying, hey, this is the executable you're going to run. And now let's tell our agent to actually run this command. So we can copy an old active response tag. Let me close it off here. Let me get the syntax right first. Our command will be outbound dash block, right? So we're specifying, oh, sorry, drop. We're going to do it on the defined agent, agent ID 006, because that's the specific agent ID of the server that I'm going to test this on. And we're going to say, okay, so now we need to specify when we want the rule to actually trigger, right? Or when we want the active response to actually trigger. So in this case, what we could do is we could set a rule level, right? So I could do high severity alerts, right? So if I go into my active response, so I could say a particular rule level, right? So and this would define a minimum severity level for that fired, right? So 16 being the highest, so I could set like a high severity, like it has to be a rule level 15 or above to trigger this active response. In this scenario, so I can easily test, let me just do 5715, which is authentication success. So I'll change that to 5715, and I'll have the timeout be 20 seconds. So what we actually need to do too is have make sure that the timeout will remove our lock, which would be the delete. So I guess, so instead of just dash A, I'll do a dash D. Okay, and we can save that off. So then after 20 seconds, that that iptables rule should go away after that. So okay, let's go ahead and save and restart. And so we're actually putting the script itself on the agent and not on the manager, right? I'm not totally sure if the manager has to have the script too. If it does, we'll just add it. But we'll see what happens. Okay, so that is added. Let me see if I can tail the active response log. All right, and let's give this a shot. So if I log on, it should trigger this. Let's see. Oh, okay, unable to invalid IP. Let me make sure that that's... Did that just fire? Yeah, it did. Okay. I suppose... I suppose we could just add it like as the IP. Here. We could specify our, we could hard set our IP, right, to just be ETH0, and then change this back to here. All right, let's give that a shot. Tell that, and if we duplicate that, log in it. Okay, okay, invalid IP, ETH0. Okay, so they're checking to make sure it's actually an IP address. Well, actually, we don't need to be all this sophisticated. Yeah, we don't need to get sexy or sophisticated at all. We can just, yeah, let me clear this out. And we can just call our command. So I'll clear all this out and just relay, we can just use bash to just call this guy, ETH0, and then we could say sleep 20 just for testing purposes. And then I'll do a dash D to then remove it. All right, let's see if that works. So, okay, it's added. I've lost my session, so good. If I look at iptables, okay, we see it's added. And now, hopefully after 20 seconds here, that should go away. Okay, looks like our 20 seconds. Okay, we got our session back too. Good. So it stayed persistent. Dash list out our iptables, and we see that it's gone. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we were getting more sophisticated than we needed to be. So I know that that works, so I'll go ahead and cut this. And I guess I can get rid of all this. Please subscribe. Oh, please subscribe. And I will save that. Okay, now let's try that again. If I refresh. Now let's see if we log in, if we can trigger that. Oh, let me tell. Okay, let's try that again. Now we're not telling it to require an IP address or anything. We're just running this straight command. So I ran that, and boom. Okay, good. So rule 5715 fired, which is a authentication success, and immediately after our script ran to disallow any outgoing traffic, which of course kills my session too. But it looked like it worked and worked well. Yeah, so we saw our authentication success, right? And then we immediately got dropped. So then if I look at the console here and load that, yeah, we see it in there. Okay, good. So if I do an IP tape, so we were able to isolate our server. So if I do a flush, and I'm then able to interact with it again, right? And now if I trigger that alert again, and all of a sudden I have lost it. So we're able, oh, and then I flushed it. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. But now I have it back, yeah. So just one more time, third time's a charm. Boom, I lost my session. If I load my IP tables, we see that the interface is configured where my mouse is. I unfortunately can't highlight it, but the interface is now dropping all traffic, so nothing can get in and nothing can get out. So that's great. That's exactly what we wanted. You can see hear my sessions timing out in the background. And we could of course change the rule ID that we wanted to fire on, right? And we could also do a timeout if we wanted to. So say, we could disallow any outbound connections for an hour, right? We could isolate the server for an hour, which would give our security team the ability to go in and investigate further and determine if whatever triggered the alert was actually malicious and the server has actually been compromised and needs to be either rebuilt or whatever protocol you guys have in place to deal with legitimate attacks. So and this was just a quick example. You see our script is basically nothing. Oh, so let me comment this out and we can go through it as well so that I don't trigger this all the time. So, and this was just a very basic example, right? We did just a rule ID for me to be able to easily trigger it to demo for you guys. And then we had just a very simple bash script, right? That if we go back into this directory here, and if we go back into this, if I could type, yeah, see, so we just have a very basic bash script that's only doing this. But it's a good example. You could get really sophisticated with it if you wanted to. And before deploying this in an actual production environment, you would want this to be much more sophisticated. You could, instead of hard coding the interface, and you could run some logic beforehand that grabs the interface that has an assigned IP, right? So you could set that so you're not having, and then you could copy this script to all of your servers rather than having to hard code if some of your servers have a different interface name that they're listening on, right? So you could get much more sophisticated with this. I highly would advise robust testing before deploying to a production environment. As you saw, if this script runs without you wanting it to, and on a false positive alert, you're prohibiting any traffic from coming in and going out. So if that server is a backend app server that is populating your web interface that your customers use or that your business uses, that would break. You have the potential to break a lot of things with this. So I highly recommend being very, very, very careful with a type of deployment like this. It's very powerful and could save you from a catastrophic, malware spreading throughout your network. But it's something that you need to perform rigorous testing on and make sure that whatever the rule ID or severity level or whatever you want to trigger the active response rule is something that is a legitimate threat, right? Like in my rule ID of just authentication success, this blocks any incoming or outgoing traffic just from a SSH login from me, right? So you wouldn't want to use that example in your production environment, right? So just fair warning, be very careful when deploying something like this, but this is a awesome way for us to be able to isolate our servers proactively without paying some commercial vendor, thousands of dollars to, when they're more or less doing the same thing, integrating with iptables and local firewalls that run on servers. So yeah, so pretty cool, pretty powerful, but again, fair warning, please be very careful when deploying something like this because it can cause major issues. And I don't want you guys losing money or losing employment because of making a silly mistake. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video.